So our next speaker is here to help us understand how demographic changes and the state's climate will impact our infrastructure in the coming decades. He will explore trends that will help us peer behind the curtain and examine his unique perspective on how we can prepare and be ready for the year 2050. Please join me and welcome to the stage the director of the Pappas Real Estate Program at NC State, Chuck Flink.
Thank you, Sarah. It's so great to be with everyone today, and glad this was able to get rescheduled. I'm going to start off with a disclaimer. I am not the great Karnak. I have no better understanding of the future than any of you sitting here today. But about 10 years plus ago, NC State asked me to come in and start teaching at the College of Design. I'm in the private sector. I was really intimidated by that opportunity, and I wanted to select a target year, and I selected it as 2050. The goal was to sort of teach students about the forces and the various datas and other things that would impact the future. And so I really started to teach to something. I had a 40-year career. I thought, look, you're going to have a 25, 35-year career. Let's talk about the future. So the purpose of today's presentation is to really share with you some of the data points that I've been using over the last decade as part of the presentation. So the first one is North Carolina is going to grow like a weed population-wise. The projection is 3 to 3.5 million people over the next 25 years. I refer to that as a population tsunami. North Carolina's done this before, by the way. I've been here 46 years, and those of you who've been around North Carolina a long time remember the last 3.5 million people that arrived and how much North Carolina really changed. But it's not, just about North Carolina changing in terms of the number of people. It's where those people are going to naturally congregate. So they're going to go to our two metro areas, the Triangle and the Charlotte region. I mean, Charlotte today is growing by 64 people a day. It is in the top 15 of the fastest growing cities in America, just to give you a perspective. You can see the green areas on the map here, the red areas, which I'll get to in just a second. But around 2 to 2.5 million people are going to just organically congregate in our two metro areas. That's the size of one of those metro areas today, just to give you a sense of how much population is going to come. Here's another interesting thing. The vast majority of that growth is going to be what we call net migration. Yes, immigrants. Most of them are coming from other states into North Carolina. But I think the significance of that is that these are non-native North Carolinians. So they don't have a frame of reference. They don't have a cultural reference. They haven't lived in this state. They're coming from other states. And I think that's a really significant thing to think about in terms of population growth. The other thing that's really fascinating, I'm 65 plus, 1 in 5 North Carolinians by the year 2050 will be over the age of 65. Just give that some thought. So lots of interesting stats there. By 2050, these are all forecasts, right? By 2050, North Carolina will really be an urban state. 75% of the population will live in either urban or suburban centers. Now, while all that's happening, we have another issue happening in North Carolina. We're losing population. Counties are really devoid of young people. And it's creating sort of two North Carolinas, the North Carolina of the haves and the have-nots. And it's a real concern, especially for a land-grant institution like NC State. We're paying a lot of attention to that. We've got Tier 1 counties across North Carolina, a whole band of them on the eastern side of the state. And I'll talk more about that as I go through the presentation. But I think significantly, and maybe you'll agree with me, what I've always loved about North Carolina is that it's a collection of small communities. It's a phenomenal collection of small communities. And some of these small communities are literally just being abandoned because there's really no economic future for them going forward. So that's something that we're paying attention to and trying to figure out how to address. Another data point that I've been focusing on is the fact the planet is warming. We just set last year a record here in the Raleigh-Durham area for heat, 106 degrees. Last summer, July, all 7 continents on the planet set record temperatures in that month. If you look at trends, which we need to look at, 48 years since the Earth experienced a colder than normal temperature year. I know we've had a cold or a cool spring, which has been great. It's been very welcomed. It's a little bit more normal for North Carolina. But April, the month of April, was the warmest April ever recorded in North Carolina in many parts of the states. So this is something that I'm paying attention to. And if you look to 2050, there are a number of forecasts. You can find your own forecast on it. But if you look to 2050, we're talking about extreme heat. This map paints an interesting picture. If you're in Florida or Texas or Arizona, 1/3 of the year will have temperatures over 100 degrees. North Carolina, the most number of 100-degree days in North Carolina has been 12 in a single year. We expect by 2050 that the average number of 100-degree days will be more than 30, and it could be higher in some parts of the state. Now, it's not to say that we don't have cities across the globe that have these kind of temperatures today, because they do. They don't occur in North Carolina, but it's certainly going to change the way that we need to think about how we plan and design and build North Carolina communities of tomorrow, and even retrofit the communities of today. And so that's something that we're really focused on at NC State in terms of understanding that. And because you live on a planet that's warming, and we are the blue planet, which means we're the planet of water, what happens when you put a pot of water on the stove and turn on the heat? The first thing you get is water vapor. So we're getting a lot more atmospheric water vapor. And this is a forecast for North America by the year 2050. And what this map is trying to tell you is the frequency of severe storm events in the future. And we just had an examination of Hurricane Helene. 28 years ago, I got involved in the very first disaster response in 2 different communities. They're both inland North American communities, Louisville, Kentucky, and Grand Forks, North Dakota. To talk about a $1 billion damage storm event 28 years ago was not very common. And now we've just suffered a $50 billion storm event. So 25 years forward, what are we looking at? With a warmer planet, with more water vapor, with more violent storm events. It's something we really have to plan for. And North Carolina is pretty vulnerable when we think about it. It's actually, outside of Florida on the eastern seaboard, North Carolina is considered the most vulnerable state for the impact from floods and storm events. So we have to really think about that. And I'm glad that Professor Andy Fox's program was mentioned earlier in the presentation, the Coastal Dynamics Lab. They're doing a lot of great work here at NC State when it comes to that. But I'm just going to cite 2 things that happened last 9 months ago. One that wasn't even predicted to happen because it's called an unnamed storm, meaning that people didn't realize it was going to happen, and it dumped a ton of water in eastern North Carolina. This is in September of last year. And then literally 2 weeks later, Tropical Storm Helene hits western North Carolina, which was considered to be a climate-safe community due to its location, just proving there is nowhere to hide from a warming planet and the impacts that are associated with that. But if you really want the whole story, you follow the money. And you look at what the insurance companies are experiencing. Now, they're using all this same data. Their whole job is to evaluate risk. And it's risk forward. It's the future, okay? And they're calculating here in North Carolina that, maybe we shouldn't be in the business of property insurance anymore because it's just too risky. The opportunity for severe and significant losses is very high. The payout is very high, and we're not in that business. We're actually not in the business of payouts. So we're seeing impact on property insurance, and it's not limited to whether you live in a floodplain or not. These are policies that are written over a landscape area, and they're being denied. So, another data point that I'm looking at in relationship to that, into housing, is the fact that we're essentially already in North Carolina in a housing crisis, and that's before 3 to 3.5 million people arrive in our state over the next 25 years. The North Carolina Chamber has published a report that says by 2029, we're about 750,000 in the rear on housing overall, and our North Carolina Housing Agency says, well, today we've got about 1 million people who are essentially subject to affordable housing issues in our state. So housing is really a critically important issue going forward. And I'll pick on Asheville, which just went through Hurricane Helene, and prior to Helene, the forecast for 2050 for Asheville was that they needed 14,000 more affordable housing units. And you just heard the statistics on what they lost due to one storm event, and that storm event was 24 hours in duration. So housing is a really, really gnarly problem in North Carolina, and the issue of affordable housing is snaring more and more people. In other words, more and more people are being affected by the word affordable because of housing prices, because of available housing supply. So it's a real problem. And I'm very blessed to be involved with the College of Design and Professor David Hill, who is the head of the department there, because we're looking at housing and they're looking at housing from a lot of different perspectives. How does it become affordable, but also how does it adapt to a climate that can have volatility involved? And so I'm really pleased to be a part of those discussions with the program that I'm in. Another big data point for me is transportation. So this is currently the highest and best transportation option you have in North Carolina today. And if you're out on the road like I am, the service level is just degrading rapidly, right? I was in Charlotte 2 weeks ago. I drove home on a Friday afternoon. I left around 1:30. Thank you, sir. And I was in bumper-to-bumper traffic, 4 lanes across for 60 miles, and it was just volume. There was not a single accident. So the level of service is degrading, and literally, I'm just going to make this statement. There's not enough real estate. There's not enough real estate in North Carolina to keep on building roads to solve our transportation problems, nor enough money. Our DOT is trying as hard as it can. But we really have to, especially if we're going to become a more urban state in the future, we really have to start investing in transportation alternatives. And I'll just say that I really like what Charlotte has done. Charlotte has gone out, their community as a whole have gotten behind investing in a diversified transportation system. If I'm not mistaken, I think they're doing about 24 million trips a year through their transit system, which is bus, BRT, trolley, light rail. Charlotte has just gone ahead and made the investment, and it's a good lesson for us to learn in other metro areas of North Carolina. Because if you wait for density, if you wait for ridership, if you wait for revenues, which is what the prescription is for transit, you're never going to get there. But Charlotte going out and investing in all those things, they're creating the density. They're creating the ridership, they're creating the revenues. So we need to really have a better transportation policy going forward. And look, a lot of people are talking about energy today. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it other than to say that the topics that I've raised today are going to be raised by either panelists, as they just were, or in the breakout sessions. And so you'll have a chance to really get the connection between energy policy and some of these other challenges. I'm stating the obvious. If you have 3 to 3.5 million more people, you're going to have a lot more energy demand. And that doesn't even account for the fact that we're talking about new types of industry like AI, which is hugely power consumptive in order to function. And it's going to move forward. So the question of the day is, where are we going to get all this energy from? And how are we going to deliver it in an affordable way, which is obviously a big question. So I'm sorry, hopefully not everybody's depressed about the future at this point. It's pretty tough to look into that glass and see what's in there. But here's my saving grace for all of you here in North Carolina. I love the fact that our legacy is a state that plans for the future, that has these kind of conversations. And we need to continue to have these conversations. The question for me is not that we will grow, but how will we grow? And how do we grow in a responsible way? How do we grow in a resilient way, a sustainable way, an equitable way? All these things are the questions of the day. And it's really folks like yourselves that get to decide the answers to those questions. If you look at the history of North Carolina, in the 1790s,
The General Assembly had enough of building state capitals in swamps. And so they literally, they got up with Joel Lane and they bought 1,000 acres on the top of the hill, right? And they built the state capitol. That's planning, that's thinking about the future. The Research Triangle Park is one of the great stories, economic stories of all time, not just in this state, but people come from all over the world to understand how that model came together. Well, Archie Davis, a banker from Winston-Salem, had to go around and sell this idea across North Carolina and raise money for it because there wasn't any money for it. And a lot of people told Archie, what are you talking, that's a stupid idea. We can't do that in North Carolina. We can't have a business park of this magnitude. So great ideas are going to struggle. They're not going to be immediately accepted. But the really great thing about the spirit of people in North Carolina is that we forge ahead. So we've got these big challenges, and we need to meet them. So Dean Hoverston drugged me into his office about 5 years ago and said, "Hey Chuck, we want to start a real estate program here at NC State, and I want your help." And the dean and I are aligned in a lot of ways as landscape architects, and we began struggling to do that. And then Peter Pappas came along and last year gave us a gift of $10 million because he believed in this program so much. And what I've come to appreciate about Peter as a real estate developer, and one of the best real estate developers in my opinion in North Carolina, is that he understands that the purpose of this is to focus on design, placemaking, and community building. Peter considers himself, as a real estate developer, someone who creates great places. And I think if you look at his portfolio of projects, you would agree with that. So we're trying to take on all these challenges, and we're trying to educate the next generation of young people, both on what these challenges are and what possible solutions are. And the program that we've launched is non-siloed and interdisciplinary. So the provost yanked me by the back of the neck and said, "All right, now, rather than report to one dean, I'm going to have you talk to 4 deans." So we're non-siloed, we're interdisciplinary. We're working with 4 colleges to pull this off. And the Chancellor Woodson accuses me of being really nerdy when I say this, but we're building stackable certificates. And we're building a very flexible education program that can appeal to people inside of our university and professionals who might want to come back and be a part of this going forward. But we have 3 legs of the stool. We have an academic program that really focuses on cutting-edge academics. We're very student-centric. We're applied. We're in person. The students are given real-life problems. The industry is coming into the classroom throughout the semester. It's really a great program for education and educating these students. And we're on the campus, we're recruiting from 6 colleges. We have 6 colleges that have students that are taking our classes. We also are doing some really great sponsored research. We had a chance to work with Fujifilm on a sustainable campus. We had a chance to work with Pfizer, looking at their program down in Sanford. We're working with the state of North Carolina, Department of Commerce, on looking at small Western North Carolina communities and how we can help them do economic development. So I'm really happy with our applied research. And we're doing engagement. We're reaching out across North Carolina, trying to be a thought leader, trying to be a convener, trying to get this conversation about development going forward. And if you'd like to know more about our program, you can log on to our website and learn more. We just published our impact report, or our year-end report for 2024. So look, I'm very much an optimist about North Carolina, given all the challenges that we face and the road ahead. 25 years, I started this work, it was 40 years when I first sort of got into this, and now it's 25 years. And that's a single generation. And the problems seem overwhelming and formidable. But I would just say this future is not written in stone. I mean, it's not something that has to happen the way that it's forecasted to happen, because I believe that we have the power to influence that by our actions today. It would be great if our state could understand these challenges, come together, work together, to really take on these challenges. So again, if you'd like more information about our program, you can actually just take your camera and take a picture of that QR code. But the forum, I'll just echo what Sarah said about this forum, because I've been involved in the forum for over 40 years, or close to 40 years, coming to these conversations. And, this is really a great place for these conversations to occur. And the energy sector is just the focus of today, but in the future, as Sarah said, they're going to be focusing on other things going forward. So I realize, some of this information is difficult to digest. I think North Carolina has a very, very bright future. But much of the success, going forward is going to hinge on our ability to meet the needs of this larger population, and how we do that. And as we mentioned, this conference is focused on the energy sector today. So with that, we're going to turn our attention to energy and programs at the national level. And to do that, I'd like for you to join me in welcoming the Executive Director of Economic Development Partnership for North Carolina, Mr. Christopher Chun.